Then good morning. Well, I wondered how to start this talk because when I was asked to give a GKV-SV's perspective on the HTAR regulation and its implementation, I was wondering whether just to come here and say, well, we're starting to get nervous and then say that's it and finish. But then I thought maybe give some slides and good reasons for us getting nervous since we were quite relaxed in the past and now it's trying to change and we're starting to think about managing uncertainty to take up things that we discussed today. And so, well, maybe this is what we need to talk about. Why are we getting nervous? We are getting nervous because there's a lot of things missing. And as we already yesterday said, in principle, we're discussing the same things we discussed a year ago and half a year ago. So there's not much more we now know we didn't know earlier. The only thing from all these implementing acts we're waiting for is that we've now seen the draft for the JCA medicinal products. And we also, I think all of us recognize that at least in parts, it's not that detailed as we maybe hoped for. So more the HTAR regulation was quite general. The implementing act is also a bit general. So we're still lacking some details. And the other thing is, well, it makes us a bit nervous if we see that the deadlines have been shifted and they are now quite close to the implementation date, to the start. And so there's no more time for shifting any deadlines in this direction. Maybe there will be turnaround, things will finish earlier, but to be honest, this is not what we're used from European processes. So it's a bit flattering to see how will we go on, because it's not only, of course, it's companies and developers who need to then fill in their data into the dossier, but it's also us. We need to prepare as a national system to take all these things up, to see where are the differences to what we are used to, what do we need to fill on a national level. And at the time, we would like to start preparing, and this is getting harder and harder with every month going on. And the other thing that we are still lacking is we've seen a lot of deliverables in UNETA 21, and we all know that UNETA 21 was designed to feed into the HTAR regulation process and its implementation. So we are expecting that maybe not all, but most of these deliverables will somehow end up in guidances from the coordination group, because that's at least our understanding how it was meant. And so we're starting to wonder where those are. Well, where are they? Especially now, the JCA report template. Now that we know that the Implementation Act did not deliver the template, we assume that the coordination group will have to deliver the template. And yeah, that's something. These are some reasons for us getting nervous. The other reasons are the facts that we now know. And I've shown a quite similar picture the last time I attended this meeting, and we've just updated it with what the Implementation Act says to see what are the timelines we are now expecting. Well, to make a long story short, this is, at least as we understand, the regulatory timeline from the EMA side with the regulatory duration of clock stops. So in the regulatory authorization, it's usually the first clock stop 3 months and the second clock stop up to 1 month. And if this timeline works as it should, then we know that there is about 55 days in the frame of the time for the HTAR regulation that can be used to shift things around, where you can do things. So if everything works fine, this should up and running, it could work. However, there are some question marks. The biggest question mark, or the first big question mark, is will the clock stop take as long as we assume? We know that the first clock stop sometimes is extended to 6 months, but we also know that it's often or sometimes shortened, and shortening the clock stop will be a problem. And we also know that the second clock stop is only necessary if the company is not able to answer the questions in the list of outstanding issues. But it could also answer, as far as but correct me, Michael, to the end of the CHMP meeting. If then the answers are already there, then the time just runs on. So there is, even this month could not be there in the end, and then we'll see whose timelines are to be shortened. And since the parallelity, it's quite obvious whose timelines are going to be shorter and when it's going to happen. And the other thing is, and that's already been discussed, we've got 2 time points in the system where, at least to our understanding, EMA will feed into the HTA process and inform the coordination groups on relevant issues coming up that might affect the label in the end. And the first one could lead to the situation that all we've done via scoping could be irrelevant and we have to start over again. That might be feasible. It might be a bit hastier than afterwards, but that might be feasible. The second one could be a problem because at this time, everything, well, will be prepared and I don't know how to change over the whole dossier if things like that happen. But that's the regular timeline. It's even worse when you look at the accelerated timeline. I mean, there is an accelerated timeline in the Implementation Act and everything is a bit shortened, but this will really only work if there's no way of making it any faster or if nothing ever changes. It's again, will there be the clock stop? We assume at least this clock stop every company will need, but we're not in this system, so we don't really know. But still, then the information on label changes will be even more close to the end. And to be honest, well, to say something about nervousity, it makes us a bit nervous to see a system that seems to be designed to run if everything runs regularly. And when we look into the text and see, well, what's going to happen if something goes wrong, then its timelines will be adjusted accordingly. Okay, we'll see what accordingly it will mean for us. And yeah, so that was a very short, but I think sufficiently short talk about what makes us nervous and what are our perspectives, because everything else has been talked about. We are still supportive of the HTAR regulation. We still see it as a European project. It's something that will bring Europe closer together, but well, we hope that's not too cumbersome in the first year.
Could you perhaps tell us a little bit more on the adaptations that might be necessary in the process to use the
In principle, if everything is as the HTAR regulation sees it, the report should be inclusive, and our problem should be more to find out what in the code report is relevant for us. Then we hear about discussions whether the methodology can be aligned or whether certain methodological things we have in Germany, I mean, most of you know of our discussion sense within questionnaires that might lead to a situation that the coordination groups comes together and says, well, we are also aligning the methodology on the most common standard. And that if this happens, and only if it happens, we will have to discuss whether we can live with this or whether we need to have all of the methodological issues that we had in our national system. And to be honest, we cannot adapt our system for the European process because we have to adapt our system as a whole. As far as we see, we will run into a situation that 2 companies who are competing with each other in the same field, one of them will get its first authorization after 2025 and therefore be within the EU process, and the other company will start with a product that has already been in the national process and gets the same indication via type 2 variation. So these 2 companies cannot have different assessments. And so when we adapt anything for the European process, we also have to change our national system as it is performed in Germany. And since this has been developed over those 13 years and every change was a hard discussion, and we don't know whether we really say, well, now it's Europe, we do not need this anymore. We can, I mean, if it was like this, if something wasn't necessary, why haven't we adapted earlier? I mean, then it's been unnecessary for the last 10 years. So that somehow stands again this assumption that we can simply, well, leave things off. And but it's still, as long as we do not know what the template is, and as long as we do not know what the methodological guideline is, we do not know what is it we get from the process and what has to be added and what. That's for us, it's the same as for you.
You're really afraid of differences between similar situations just because of the time.
We cannot allow that, because then we find each other in front of a court. That's a typical German way. As when we start treating same companies different, then it's going to be in front of court.
Thank you very much for sharing the view.
Thank you for sharing your anxieties. I was curious to see, as part of your discussions, whether you have been able to put on the table what the potential corrections for the imperfections could be. Because here you're saying this is what could happen in a perfect world, and even within a perfect world, you have some anxiety. So, what could be the kind of corrections that would address the imperfections?
That's it's hard to answer. I mean, Monher was the one who asked yesterday, is it really clever to have those two processes in parallel? Because the one assumes that the first is already finished and is finished within the expectations. And in the past, our answer has always been, well, then it's up to the company to decide wisely which indication to ask for, to ask only for indications that will be granted and not to ask for wider indications simply because one hopes to convince EMA. If it's that simple, then all of this won't happen at all. Then it's just timelines and you can come up to this. The real big problem is, well, if something really goes wrong, and then, I mean, if Germany designed the process for a cause that it's following the approvals, that we only start after approval has been finished. But we also know that this is a special situation since we grant access for every medicine, and other countries want to have the data to be able to grant early access, and so they need to do the process in parallel. I don't know, maybe it's clever to ask our nice colleagues how they manage these things, because they must have encountered these problems of changing indications within the approval and how to deal with that, and whether this could be a picture for us. I don't know, but yeah, I don't have an answer, sorry.
Are you worried at all about the pharma package, the new EU legislation? Because these timelines are modeled on the current EMA procedure, and the new one is supposed to be much shorter, with one of the assessments rounds being deleted, and also the mission time is only slightly shorter, but at least it's shorter or something.
I mean, yes, we've seen that. When we had the chance to comment on that, we commented, well, is it really wise to change it with the view that you're just about to implement the HTA regulation and you're not prepared for this change? We don't know. We've talked to our ministry, so we've talked to everybody who should know that there is something going wrong. And since neither the parliament nor the commission reacted, it's, in my opinion, up to the member states to say, well, maybe it's not worth shortening authorization. I mean, we're talking about 1.5 months in total. To be honest, I cannot think of a situation where this 1.5 months is really worth that much fuss, but maybe I lack fantasy.
And maybe that's the reason why you shouldn't, hope for too much details in legal texts like implementing acts, to keep flexibility within the system. But of course we need to know that what will happen, some kind of risk instruction, but perhaps not in implementing acts. I was already worried that in the legislation are so definitive things, 45 days and 30 days and etc. And then we see now that the EMA process is changing. So it's really, I wonder if it's wise to have it that detailed in the legislation. But yeah. Yes.
I think 1, 2, 3. Correct. If not, then correct me. Take over.
If we're fast, we can do 3, but after that, I think we have to move on.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your concerns. So how does this affect the engagement with companies? So for example, the dossier advice aspect. So in Germany, the GBA offers advice about the dossier. Is this changing, or is it fundamentally changing? It's hundreds of times per year that you meet with companies, or the GBA meets with companies.
No, I mean, there is a discussion, as far as I know, ongoing on the European level, how to deal with the fact that, well, to avoid the situation where a company chooses to fill in PICO 1 because it's for Germany and to omit PICO 3 because it's for, let's say, Czechia, to name someone with they haven't named up until now because it's not important enough, which would lead to the situation where we do not reveal which PICO belongs to which country. And whether this is possible or not will be a legal question. We will see. But besides that, we do not see any need to change, because what we tell the company will also be what we feed into the PICO process in the end. And well, of course, there might be things falling out during the consolidation, and we need to find out what this will mean for the national process, whether this really is a difference or whether it's just for the process and doesn't matter at all. But our answers must not change simply because of the process we're feeding it in. So no, it's not going to change.
In theory, the EU HTA regulation is going to change a lot for pharma company. But if I think at HAS in France, I do not expect any change in their process or in their conclusion in relation to EU HTA. And I'm not an expert about Germany, but I don't see how in Germany it may change the way IQWIC and GBA make that decision. So is it having any impact on GBA and IQWIC in practice? In France, I can tell you it will have no impact.
It changed the way we need to work. So, I mean, currently, when the manufacturer gives the dossier to the GBA and then IQWIC takes a look on it, IQWIC already makes the selection of endpoints and says us, well, this is relevant, this is not relevant, this is valid, this is not valid. And as far as we understand the European process, at least relevancy will not be part of it. Whether validity will really be a point that will be decided. So we don't even look at this endpoint, we'll have to see. So what will change is the basis IQWIC and we are working on it, how to get our information out of these reports. But besides that, I'm with you. We will not change anything on how we decide afterwards. And it surely will not change how we then negotiate with the company, because this is beyond that. So it's more processes and how the information is delivered. Yeah.
If it has no impact, is it worth something?
Yes, because I mean, it's what we see up until now is that from 27 member states, we do not get 27 PICOs. We get something less, but we earlier had, at least if a company really enters all European markets, and that's something we're aiming for. So it's less to be filled, but it's filled at one point of time. So maybe for Germany and France, it will not change that much, but we see our neighbor states which really say it will change something, because we will get data we haven't had up until now. We will get analysis which weren't given to us earlier, because that's something we regularly hear from our colleagues. What? You're getting analysis like this? If we ask for that, then the company says, no, this is what we give to you, and that is. And this is gonna change, though there will be more transparency. At least that's what our neighbors tell us. But yes, for us, we just have to accommodate our process, but get the things at the right point.
Maybe to echo a question from yesterday, what do you see success look like for new HTA? And then what will Germany get from that success? What will you gain?
What success for us will be if we end up in a situation where our workload is getting less, not my workload, since I'm on the payer side, so we will have the same workload as before, but the workload for the HTA organizations, simply because it's more shoulders relying on, and we know that this will not be in the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It will probably be the other way around, that in these first years, the big member states will have the workload and the other ones will start building. But after that, we think that we will end up in a situation where it will be more handleable. We also, as a payer, we think that there's so much in these horizon scanning projects we are not really touching on, because we don't have things like that, at least not on a national scale. So there might be a lot into that for preparedness. But yeah, that's what we, on the long run, we think. On the short run, it's if it's working, yeah. Something that I will not be as Stefan Lange yesterday to say if it survives the first year, because we think it's too big to fail. It will work and we will adapt in the process. But if it's running and if it's running smoothly after 2 years, then this is a success.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't hear cooperation or harmonization in HTA methods and scientific approaches.
I think for Germany, more cooperation would only be possible if something happens that neither you nor me nor politicians want, if we install the fourth hurdle. Because then there would be points where we can work together more closely with other countries, or if we came to a pharmacoeconomical evaluation with modeling, then we could also say, well, afterwards we can adapt. But on this scale, as long as Germany is the sole early access country, there are limits to, because our question will always be different. I think this is something that we should never forget. Germany always asks a different question. We will never ask, is it worth allowing this drug to the market as a result of the assessment? We will only ask, what is the relevant price and what is the relevant position in the medical treatment for this drug? And so different questions will limit possibilities for cooperation.
Thank you.